Am I audible in the back? Is it too loud? Thank you, Gurvinda, for those kind words of introduction. The only objection I have is the use of the word guest speaker. I don't feel I'm a guest here because Krishna said all the foundations and all the schools are one. So long as we are associated with any aspect of the work of Krishnamurti, we are not guests, we are internal people, hosts, if you like. Krishnamurti talked about the art of living right from the 1930s and 40s. But he meant something quite different by it from what meaning it has taken on in society, because various gurus have used the same term to refer to certain methods and techniques of meditation or trying to come upon peaceful mind and so on. So I thought I would talk about what I understand from his teachings as the art of living and the various aspects of it. At the very outset, I'd like to make it clear that what I'm saying is not an interpretation of what he has said. What I'm saying is my own understanding, which has come to me through the investigation of his teachings. For the original teachings, it is best to go to his books and read them directly. But even when you read his book, your mind also interprets the meaning of the words he is using. So in a sense, it is not possible to avoid interpretation completely. But interpretation per se is not evil. It becomes evil when you accept it as the truth. First of all, it's just an intellectual understanding, and the intellectual understanding is not the truth. Otherwise, the professor of philosophy in a university has all the intellectual understanding of what the Buddha has said, what Jesus Christ has said, what Socrates has said, and so on. And he can tell you all about it. But his consciousness is not the consciousness of the Buddha or of Jesus. So the intellect does not bring about a transformation of consciousness. And it is that bit going from the description of the truth to the perception of that truth in your own daily life. That is the difficult or pathless bit. There is no method, there is no path for it. Because perception cannot be given to you by a book or by a teacher. A technique can be taught, a question can be communicated, but when the answer lies not in the intellectual, logical understanding, but at the level of perception, it is something one has to come upon for oneself through one's own observation of one's consciousness in daily life, operating in daily life. Interpretation becomes a divisive thing if it is coupled with authority. That means somebody is claiming that I have the truth and he is giving his interpretation as the truth and he claims to be an authority. Authority has no significance in this inquiry. There is the authority of the policeman, the authority of law. There are various places where authority has meaning. But in the quest for truth, authority and interpretation have no significance. So it's not that the other person is creating authority or creating interpretation, but that our mind is accepting that as the truth. That creates illusion. Devinder asked me to explain the word illusion. Illusion means something that has been put together by thought and accepted to be true. It is not a fact of nature, but something conjured up by the human mind. Then it's not a fact, but just a concept. And if you accept that concept as the truth, then it becomes an illusion. If you know that it is an illusion, then it is not an illusion. Like fairy tales. Fairy tales we know are not real, they are not true. But if you thought of them as something true, then it would be an illusion. So that is also the difficulty of freeing the mind of illusion, because one doesn't know one's own illusions. The terrorist is not aware that he is in illusion. He is very sure about his conclusion that I have to take revenge and so on. It's an opinion he has and he is extremely sure of it. We see it as an illusion. He's thinking of it as a solution. We are seeing it as a false thing, as an illusion he is trapped in. But he is not aware of it. Similarly, we are not aware of the illusions in our mind. And that is also the difficulty of unlearning them or dropping them. Which is why I think Krishna said, don't accept what I say. Don't reject it either. Investigate. In investigating the question, you come upon your own perceptions, and that is your own understanding. From that understanding, you speak. Don't just repeat my words and throw my words out as preaching, because the truth cannot be communicated through words. Truth lies at the level of perception, not at the level of ideation. That's an important aspect of his teaching. It will also automatically come in our understanding of the art of living. So with that introduction, I want to tell you about what I have understood from his teachings as the art of living. He said life is relationship. Not only relationship to people, but also relationship to work, to ideas, to religions, to nature, everything. I have a relationship with anything to which there is a response from within my consciousness. So the word relationship here is being used in that sense. I have a relationship with the sky and the stars because when I look at it, there is a response from my consciousness. I have a relationship with the dog around the corner, with the river, with the students in my school, with my neighbor. Everything. With everything, I have relationship. And so relationship is, life is relationship. So if we want to find out what is right living, we have to understand what is right relationship to everything. And when you put everything in its right place, that creates beauty. Beauty, if a picture is beautiful, it has everything in the right proportion. That's the definition of beauty. So when you put everything in its right place, it creates beauty. And beauty is the very essence of art. Without a sense of beauty, there is no art. Now we don't know what is the right place of everything. So you have to investigate, you have to work on it, find out what is the right place. And that's why it is not something that a book can tell you or a guru can give you. You have to discover it for yourself. And so that's how I understand that it means that you have to be a light unto yourself. Self-knowledge, unlike knowledge, is not something you can get from a book. It is that understanding which you have received through your own perceptions in your own life. There is great beauty in every aspect of life, in every activity, if we have the eyes to see, which means if we have the sensitivity. There is great beauty in nature, there is great beauty in sports and games, in yoga, in gymnastics. There is great beauty in physics and mathematics and academics, and of course in all art, music, and so on. There is great beauty in friendship, in relationship. Now, beauty means the joy that is innately there in engaging in that activity. Not the joy of winning a game or achieving a result. That's different. That's an egotistic joy. You get a feeling of joy of having accomplished something or procured something for yourself. We are not talking of that. We are talking of the joy of engaging in that activity itself. Now, it's not easy to perceive that joy. It is a form of sensitivity. Sensitivity does not come from ideas, from books, and so on, from lectures. You can't get sensitivity. Sensitivity comes from contact. And there is contact only when you pay attention. When you pay attention and you come close to something, there is a relationship that develops, and in that there is the perception of beauty. Take classical music, whether Western classical or Indian classical. You need to listen to it, pay attention, and the sensitivity will develop, and you will perceive the beauty in that music. But instantly it is not available. So that is also the way you perceive beauty in nature. If you pay attention to nature, you watch nature, you live with nature as a friend of nature, that sensitivity, that sense of beauty of nature, it does something to you. It is innately there. That's what I'm saying. It's not created by you, by your thinking. It develops, grows organically, naturally. I think biologists and scientists find it difficult to understand why this sense of beauty was put by nature into our consciousness. Even if we didn't have it, we could survive. So if only those characteristics which develop, which are needed for survival, this sense of beauty, this sense of joy doesn't seem to be required for survival. I'm not sure animals have that, but they survive. It's something that is a jewel given to us by nature. And I'm not sure we have valued it sufficiently, because we have created our own sense of the pursuit of joy, or actually you can't pursue joy because it's something that is innately there in that activity. What you pursue is pleasure, the pleasure of achievement, the pleasure of possession, the pleasure of both psychological pleasures and physical pleasures. Joy cannot be pursued. Like if you see a beautiful sunset, or you see the peaks, snow-capped peaks of a mountain range, why does your heart fill with some sense of joy, some sense of beauty? It has no cause. It is innately there in our consciousness. As also the capacity for love, the capacity for compassion is innately there. As distinct from a sense of pity, as distinct from the joy of accomplishment and achievement and so on. Of just being, the joy of being. And art is like that. Now art cannot be learned, even the simple art, painting, music, cannot be simply learned from a book or from a teacher. You have to work on it. It won't come straight away. But you can come upon it. And then it gives you sense that joy. You grow into that sensitivity. Some kind of flowering takes place within our consciousness which enables that. And that's a form of sensitivity. That's why I think Krishna gave tremendous importance to changing education, so that education is not just cultivating academics and mental skills and abilities, but also creating sensitivity. And that's why our schools and so on are placed in great beauty, surrounded by nature, with all life around. Because when you grow up with that environment, it automatically develops within you, flowers within you. It's an atmosphere that is conducive to religious inquiry. And that inquiry is, what is right living? It's obvious that human beings don't know what right living is. If we knew, our society wouldn't be this way. Just read your newspapers and see what society is. It's not a beautiful life. So we don't know what right living is. But you can learn it. If you just accept everything that society is telling you, then you don't learn it. What you learn is what society is. You become like society, you maintain society. And that's what Krishna said, that you are the world. Your society is the way it is because you are the way you are. And that's the truth. Deep truth. If we have casteism in our minds, there is casteism in society. If we have religious bigotry in our minds, there is religious division in society. Otherwise, it's not there. So we are the world. We are creating our own society, not different from it. Then, how do you discover what right living is? And if you don't have right relationship, you are not living rightly. So you have to learn this by saying to yourself, I don't know, but I am going to find out. And that's the spirit of inquiry, the religious inquiry as distinct from scientific inquiry. One aspect of this is to ask oneself, what is the right spirit in which to approach any aspect of life? In any aspect of life, there is a technique and a method and a structure to be learned, which you can learn from books, from teachers, and so on, experts. But there is also a certain spirit in which you have to engage in that activity. Otherwise, it becomes superficial. It doesn't have any deep significance. Let me give a few examples to illustrate that. There is the technique of religion. The ritual, the prayer, the belief, all those are the methods and the techniques or method of meditation. But the spirit of religion is the feeling of love, of compassion, of non-violence, of affection for no reason. All that is the spirit of religion. If you don't have the spirit of religion and you only practice the techniques don't create the spirit. How does one come upon that spirit is the deeper question. Take government or democracy. It has a form, and the form is there in our country, that the executive is separated from the judiciary, that you have elected representatives who are elected every few years by popular vote, that they sit down and form the laws in the legislature which structure the way we are to be controlled in society, and the government enforces those controls. There is the freedom of the press which keeps us informing what is actually taking place and so on. This is the form of democracy. But the spirit of democracy is not the form. The spirit of democracy is that all of us are interested in living peacefully, having a society where there is justice, equality, affection, prosperity, peace. But we don't know how to organize society. So let us all get together, confer what is the best way to organize society. In that, we listen to each other with respect. Different people give different opinions and aspects. You think about it, and in doing so, you educate yourself about the issues that are involved. And then you invite proposals, suggest what is the best way to organize. In that, some proposal comes from one group of people and another proposal comes from another group of people. Then you put it to vote. You accept the one that is where majority of the people say, let's try this. But when you try this, everybody helps in it because we are all friends. We are all have a common purpose for which we are working. We may not agree on the methodology. But when we have selected a methodology by this process, we all contribute to it. We don't oppose it. We don't try to break it down. So that is the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of mutual respect. Opposition doesn't mean blind opposition fighting with each other. So if the spirit of democracy is not there, then democracy functions the way you are seeing it function. You cheat, that means you really don't believe in democracy. You cheat. You use money power to buy votes. You tell lies to the public to get votes. Why do we do that? We ourselves have adopted democracy and we ourselves are cheating. Because self-interest makes you cheat. So do we see the danger of operating or dominating self-interest within oneself? That's called the ego. So each politician, if he is approaching this democracy egoistically, he uses the power for his own purpose. And we call that corruption, because his role there is to work for the whole, for the society, for the better of the society. He's really using that power to build his own house and his own reputation and so on. Which means he's using the power egoistically, not holistically. So if you don't learn the right spirit, you don't have the right relationship. Take sports. There is the technique of playing cricket. You can learn that from experts. You can go there and so on and learn how to hold the bat, how to play the balls and so on. But the sportsman's spirit is something different from the technique, the method. If you give tremendous importance only to winning and not to the joy of playing the game, of engaging in this activity, it becomes an egoistic activity. Then you are terribly disappointed if you lose the game. Or if your opponent falls and therefore you win. Outwardly, politely you may say, I'm sorry, but inwardly you are happy because your aim has been achieved of having won. And you feel like cheating in the game in order to win. So all that comes out of the ego, out of the selfishness of wanting something only for oneself. If you don't approach it that way, if you give importance to the beauty of playing the game, the joy that is innately there, then none of these negative qualities appear. So, if you are interested in the art of living, you are interested in discovering the beauty in every aspect of life. And there is tremendous beauty in all aspects of life. Then you must not approach it egoistically, because it destroys that joy, destroys the beauty, brings in a lot of what Krishnaji called disorder into our consciousness. Art. There is the technique of painting, of pottery. You can learn that from experts and so on. But unless you have a sense of beauty, what are you trying to express through that art? And that sense of beauty is the spirit of doing art. So then you have to learn the technique. There is such a thing as excellence in the technique, but there is also the excellence of the spirit, which is the excellence of consciousness. The world gives tremendous importance to achievement through technique, through method, and has ignored consciousness. So you find a person who is brilliant, extremely knowledgeable, extremely efficient in his profession, great achiever, but at the level of consciousness, his relationships break down. He's fighting, he's ambitious, he's troubled, he's angry, he's jealous of other people, and so on. So he's not living holistically a beautiful life, not a right life, though he has achieved a lot, and he might get a Nobel Prize. You have several examples of that, I don't have to give it. I'm just pointing out that our mind gets conditioned by all this propaganda in society that it's extremely important to achieve a lot and that is success. Is it? Is it really success to achieve something and lead a miserable life otherwise? Just because you want a pat, you want people to clap and make a hero of you. What about your own life? It's not so easy. You need to learn the art of living. Not that there is anything wrong in achieving. There is a dialogue that comes to my mind. There was this physicist called Fritjof Capra, who wrote the book Tao of Physics. He was at one time interested in Krishnamurti's teachings and attended his lectures and so on. Then he went to him and said, "Sir, do I need to give up my physics in order to do what you are saying?" And Krishnaji said, "No, sir, but you are first a human being and then a physicist, isn't it? So learn the art of living, then do your science." So it's not that you must not do science or you must not achieve in your profession. That's not being said. Not at the expense of the art of living, the art of relationship, because that's your whole life. And this is just one aspect of your life, your professional work, making a living, and so on. So to come upon the right spirit of every activity, who's going to teach us that? Can we at least plant this question in our own mind and therefore also in the minds of the children? That unless you engage in an activity in the right spirit, it goes wrong. As democracy is going wrong in our country, though there is nothing wrong with the structure of democracy. You adopt a method of examinations as part of education, then you cheat in that. You copy, you beat, you try to get the marks. You don't believe in that system, isn't it? You marry, you have a family, you accept that structure, you want the benefits of that structure, then you cheat. You don't keep your word. So you don't really believe in that structure. That kind of attitude, that I'll accept it only because everybody else will praise that, and I'll cheat so long as I'm not trapped. That is what the ego does within us. That means all the time I'm wanting to eat the cake and have it also. And that's the tragedy. That means we have not really come upon the art of living. So one has to ask deeper questions. You know, if you make a tree grow, you plant a tree and it grows in nature. If it's nice, healthy tree, it has received right kind of manure and so on, sunlight. It grows, it flowers. And when you look at it, there is beauty in that. You call it the tree is blooming. We have an idea what it is for a tree to bloom. We have an idea what it is for a horse or a tiger to bloom. I mean, if it's in the forest, healthy, sprinting, it's a joy to watch that. What is it for the human consciousness to bloom? Aren't we also part of nature? Do we know what it is for the human consciousness to bloom? Krishnaji called it flowering. He said there is an inward flowering Flowering, you don't make the plant flower, it flowers. It's part of nature. That flowering is this art of living. Inwardly, but it needs a lot of understanding, a lot of self-knowledge, a lot of inquiry before you discover these joys, a lot of sensitivity. When you are too much taken up with achievement, you are using time to go in a particular direction and you develop a sense of utilization of time and a waste of time. So when you are very ambitious going in a particular direction, time is being utilized to go in that direction. If my child comes and talks to me and wants to do homework, I say it's a waste of time. I'm using my time to go in that direction, and paying attention to this child doesn't take me in that direction. So it's a waste of time. So we have to ask ourselves, what is waste of time? From where does this whole concept of waste of time and utilization of time come? Isn't that an illusion created by our own mind? That means we are accepting that as inevitable, as true, may not be, may be an illusion, and then you are trapped in that illusion. The whole concept of success given by society, if you don't question it, you're trapped in it. That's what becomes success. You're doing something to get a pat on your back from whatever is your community. Why? Why has it become so important to get a pat on the back from some group of people? Then you are trapped in that. That becomes the illusion. So all this, one may not be aware of all this, and all this is also part of conditioning. Conditioning is not just religious conditioning and so on. All this, the way we are approaching is also conditioning. You just got it by imitation of society around us. We haven't thought it out. And so Krishna says, it's extremely important to free yourself of conditioning. What is freedom from conditioning? I have grown up in society. I have learnt in imitation of my parents and whatever, my school, and so on. That becomes my conditioning, that way of life, those values, those beliefs. Are we permanently trapped in this conditioning? Or can we learn? There are two kinds of learning. There is the learning which is accumulative, like knowledge, more and more and more, or skills, more and more skills, where you can practice, where you can use experts, where authority has meaning. There is this other learning to discover the right spirit of a particular activity, the right relationship with various things, which is part of self-knowledge. It is not something you can get from anybody else. Take for instance, what is my relationship with pleasure? Should I try to increase the amount of pleasure in my life? Is that the mission of life? Should I pursue pleasure? Should I avoid pleasure? What is the right place of pleasure in life? And is it not important to learn that? If you pursue pleasure, it goes wrong. You get addicted. And you want only that, and therefore you can't pay attention to the rest of the things. If you avoid pleasure, also it goes wrong. How much food should you eat? Should you go on eating more and more food because it gives you pleasure? Or should you abstain from food? Both extremes go wrong. How will you find out what is the right place? And who's going to tell you where? Where does need end and greed begin? Art, it's an art. Art cannot be learned from a book. You can't learn swimming also from a book. Wherever there is a balance required, you can't learn. You have to actually get into the water, play with it, and you will discover. You can swim. Same way about painting, about any art. You can't learn it from the book. Even bicycling you cannot learn from the book. You'll have to get up on the bicycle, you'll fall a few times, but you will learn eventually how to balance on that bicycle. The art of living is like that. Not just an opinion that this is good, this is bad. That's too superficial. Doesn't work. So, that right relationship, I don't know what that right relationship is. I must watch, I must learn to discover for myself. And that's why it is the art of living. What is the right relationship with sex? Should we avoid sex? Should we pursue sex? Both things go wrong. What is the right place of sex? What is the right place of money in our life? Who's going to tell you how much money should be? Unless you ask these deeper questions, money has only that much value which things which money can buy have in your life. So find out what money can buy and what money can't buy. It can buy food, it can buy travel, it can buy medicine, it can buy education for your child. Those things the money can buy. It can't buy happiness. It can't buy a sense of beauty. It can't buy peace of mind. The greatest things in life are those which money can't buy. And yet, in whole of society, it has become such an important thing to have more and more money. You need to question that. That may be an illusion. We are just caught on because everybody else is thinking that way. So what is the right place of money? If I ignore money, it goes wrong. If I pursue money, it goes wrong. That is the art of living. It needs inquiry. It needs playing, experimentation, observation, learning for yourself through watching. You can't, it's not like an engineering drawing where you draw a line and say, this much is enough. Now you have read in Buddhism and so on that desire or craving is the source of all sorrow. So you wanted to come to this talk. If somebody says, why are you going there? Isn't this desire? So how much desire is all right and when does desire become a problem? Who's going to tell you? Is all desire to be cut out? When you take that as a decision, you are afraid of a woman. You are afraid of good food because it produces desire. It produces fear when it's held as a conclusion. So not to live with conclusions like that. You can't practice virtue consciously through a decision. Virtue is a state of being, state of mind. You can discover it for yourself, then it is there. But if you try to consciously cultivate it, you end up in hypocrisy and you end up in conflict. That's not the art of living. So self-knowledge is the key to wisdom. That's what Krishna said. And all this is part of self-knowledge. What is the right approach to whole of life? I've talked about individual activities, but what about the whole of life? If you approach it with self-interest, your self-interest clashes with the self-interest of the other guy, and you have enmity. If you approach it egoistically, you are wanting something for yourself all the time, in every relationship. That's the ego. The ego is actually a somewhat facile name we have given to begging. The ego is a beggar. In every relationship you are asking something for yourself. Find out whether you can approach everything like a true friend. A true friend is one who is not seeking anything from you and therefore cultivates friendship. He is coming just to share life, not wanting anything from you. We understand that, isn't it? So true friendship is like true love, where there is affection for no reason. But when there is a motivation of gain, of wanting something for oneself, it's not love, it's not friendship. It's something that, like a contract, you are cultivating. But we call that. We don't really understand what friendship is. So true friendship is not to approach the other human being egoistically, asking something for yourself. Now why can't I be a true friend to everything? To the tree, to the cow, to the child. Don't approach it asking something for yourself. That's the spirit in which, that's the right spirit for approaching life. Not because Krishnamurti has said that. Try it. Approach the other way and you will see what complications arise. And you will discover for yourself that acting out of self-interest is not in self-interest. That's the illusion whole of humanity is living under. We think self-interest is in self-interest. It is when you see only this far, it seems profitable. When you see farther, which is the longer vision or wisdom, you discover that it's not really. Krishna said, it's more dangerous than fire. Your house burning is just your property gone. And you are so mighty scared of that. But actually this ego process is spoiling your whole life, not just your house or property. Whole life, all your relationships, everything. And you are not aware of it. So it's an illusion. That itself is also an illusion, that acting out of self-interest is in my self-interest. So this illusion runs very deep. And to free your mind of these illusions, you need to inquire, what is right living? And I don't know what right living is. So, as I have understood him, he is saying, be yourself. Don't judge. Don't condemn yourself. Don't say this is right, this is wrong. Try to understand yourself as a phenomenon. When you want to understand a phenomenon, you don't condemn that phenomenon. You watch very carefully, pay attention and watch. In that watching you will discover for yourself the danger of approaching life egoistically. And when you have perceived it for yourself, it will drop away. Because nature has put in our system an intelligence which is not the intelligence of our thinking or brain, but from the brain. It's there in the organism, which does not let you court danger. But when you have not perceived it, you are not aware of the danger. And therefore there is what we call temptation. There is temptation and there is the fear, and there is this conflict between temptation and fear. That shows, if you experience that, it's telling me, Krishna, there's something you have not clearly understood. Your mind is not clear. Why did this conflict arise in you? Why is there temptation? And then the fear and therefore the control required. The very fact that you have to control is telling you that you have not really understood deeply life, and you have to find out what that is. So it's really, when we talk about understanding oneself, it's really looking at cause and effect within the psyche. I find there a parallel. I was a scientist and I was also interested in Krishnamurti. And I saw this parallel between the two inquiries. That in science also you are looking for the cause for the phenomenon. And here also Krishnamurti is saying, if you feel jealousy, if you feel anger, if you have hatred, If you have division, there is a cause for it. Find out what that cause is. Now, in order to find out the cause, you will have to watch this phenomenon to discover it. And if the cause is arising from some assumption, some illusion which your own mind has created, you can dissolve it. Don't approach life that way, then it's not there. If it's an organic cause, like a biological cause, like pain, when you fall down and break your bones, there is pain. The sage also experiences that pain. But the psychological pain, which comes from self-pity and depression, all that is creation of my own approach and my own thinking. It's that I need to learn to free myself of. What pain nature has put there is necessary. It has put fear, those instincts. That fear protects you. The biological fear protects you. But the mind creates psychological fears. And I have imaginary fears and I keep worrying about them. That's a neurotic state. So that's, one has to learn what is the right use of thinking, what is the right use of memory, what is the right use of imagination. None of these is valueless. None of them are free from danger. It is imagination that creates that neurosis and so on. It is imagination that helps you to do planning. So, what is right use of imagination? Who's going to teach you that? You have to learn for yourself. It's part of self-knowledge. So without self-knowledge, without wisdom, it goes wrong. Because one is not approaching that, one not approaching life or any particular aspect of life in the right spirit, in the right way, with the right state of mind and consciousness. And that, to learn about that is the art of living, to learn the art of living. So I'll end it here. That's how I have understood from him. It's not just a technique or a method or a practice which can bring you to that art of living. Not that you must not practice any technique or do any. Don't do it with this illusion that it is going to teach you the art of living. Do it with a learning mind to find out what that technique does. There's nothing wrong in trying a technique as part of your learning. But when you look upon it as an achievement, it becomes an ego process. And through an ego process, you cannot come to freedom from the ego. This learning itself must not be done egoistically. Thank you. And we can have some questions if you have.
You can bring the microphone to you if you
want to ask some questions.
If you don't, you have also to ask why there are no questions.
Good morning, sir. I have, on the aspect of flowering, I have two questions. First one is, when did you realize that the state of flowering has taken place within you? And the second aspect is, what are the conscious steps you took to arrive at the state of flowering?
There are no conscious steps that I took. I myself wondered why I was interested in physics, not in biology or chemistry. I can't still answer that question. That was part of my being, my swabhav, as we call it, your inner nature. That has no cause. That is something that scientists will call it genetics. In the same way, I can't answer why this inquiry interested me, but it did. I was a student, I read Krishnamurti's book. Some other student might have read the book and put it aside saying this is philosophy, but it engaged me. I can't answer why it engaged me. And when I have looked at that question for myself as to why, I found that there is a certain parallel between the two. That in science it is intriguing because it says what is the cause of this, what is the cause of that, and so on. And Krishnamurti's inquiry is also similar, but in the field of the psyche. What is the cause of anger, of insult, of hurt? Can I free myself of that cause? Or so long as the cause is there, the effect is there, and I must only control the effect? So these questions were of interest to me. They are not of interest to everybody. So there is no conscious steps that I took. That was my nature, and therefore it became partly my passion in life. And there were these two parallel passions, one about understanding the way nature functions, and the other about understanding the way my own consciousness functions. Your other question is, how do we know that the flowering has actually taken place? You don't know. The only concrete step I can suggest is watch your consciousness. Be yourself, watch your consciousness. If there is conflict, if there is jealousy, if there is anger, if there is a feeling of rivalry, you know that flowering has not taken place. Somewhere you have not really understood. Something is wrong. And therefore, if you are interested, you must discover what causes those things to happen. Because if you don't eliminate the cause, the effect follows, just as much in nature as in your psyche. So I must examine and understand through observation the causation of that within myself. And that is this inquiry, learning about it. It may end or it may not end. It's like you learn physics, you can't insist that you must become Einstein. You start with this inquiry, you can't insist that you must become Krishnamurti. But you'll probably become a better Krishna. And that's good enough. That's your fate. Don't be greedy and want more. That's how I look at it.
You talked about this art of living, this balancing, this greed and the need. So where to draw the line? So much money I required, I will provide. But how to draw the line between these two to balance the
Quite
life?
right, sir. Good question. There are those lines only in science and in engineering and so on. There are no lines here. There is a grey area. You go from the white to the dark through a whole grey area, and you are trying to draw that line in that grey area. How do you draw a line in the grey area that this much is enough and not more?